Hey, what's going on? It's Kevin Kenney hanging inside the Billboard offices here in New York with Verite. What's going on?
Nothing. How you doing?
I'm pretty well. We just saw you perform 3 new songs off of the debut album that comes out Friday. This is album release week. How does it feel?
It feels busy and kind of insane in a very good way. Like I'm ready for the album to be out for sure.
Is it a bit surreal now having Friday just a couple days away at this point?
It is. I feel like I've put in probably the past year and a half of concentration and energy into something, and to have that chapter close is kind of surreal. So ask me how I feel on Friday, and I'm sure it'll be different than how I feel now.
Is it bittersweet at all? You're talking about a chapter closing there.
It's weird. The chapter closes and that feels great, and then you get to kind of re-experience the album live, which is kind of my favorite part. And so you get to go back and reinterpret things and reimagine things and change the things you wish you had done differently. So I can't wait to kind of move into the touring phase of it.
Something I really love about your music, and I think made me a fan of your music when I first was introduced to it, is this sort of like, at least this is how I perceive it. There's this like threatening element to some of your songs where it's a very advancing sound. It's a sound that comes right at you. Songs like Saint come to mind, or When You're Gone come to mind. And it's something I really enjoy about another genre that I really enjoy, which is 90s rock. And I actually read that, maybe I'm not too crazy, that you actually grew up on 90s rock.
I did. And first, I really like the idea that you called my music semi-threatening.
Well,
it's the highest compliment.
No, but I mean, there's this element of danger when you listen to it. Like, you almost like don't know how far away the sound is that's coming at you, but it's like unapologetic and it comes straight through when you're listening to the music.
Thank you. Yeah, that was definitely my goal, especially with this album. But I grew up listening to anything that was on alternative radio at the time, which was kind of like Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots, Green Day for sure. And then I was in like an all-girl punk cover band when I was in middle school, which was tragic, but also a shitload of fun. So
I want to talk about the punk cover band because I read about that too, and I'm a huge punk rock fan. I don't know exactly when you were in middle school, but if you're talking like late 90s to mid 2000s, there's some great punk songs you can draw from for covers. What were you playing back then?
See, I feel like I was not like hip to what was current, and so I was playing like the Breeders, the Cranberries, obviously Green Day, like the Donnas. We did some, and then we tried covering like Zeppelin and Jethro Tull and stuff like that. And so it was really all over the place. And, we didn't have a real drummer, but me and my bassist were like laser focused.
And you were the lead singer, of course.
Yeah, and I played like electric palm muted guitar.
Right on. You had me at Breeders. I'm a huge Kim Deal fan.
Oh my goodness. Last Splash is my favorite.
Yes, I have that on vinyl. I'm like a big Breeders nerd.
Oh, see, I need to get it on vinyl.
Now, you grew up in Orange County, New York, which is probably about, I don't know, like a half hour north of where I grew up in northern New Jersey. Not really a hotbed per se for like music, or maybe I'm naive. What was it like growing up there musically?
It was oddly supportive. I feel like the town that I come from in particular is this kind of small art community that's literally an hour from the city. And so there's lots of little venues. And so I've been playing shows since I'm like 8 or 9,
really?
And I started with my dad playing guitar and me playing piano and covering like Drops of Jupiter and that Nelly Furtado song that was massive, the first single, I forget what it's called. And so it's always just been something I did. And I started playing shows in the city when I was 16 to nobody. But still, I was always like hyper ambitious, and that community definitely allowed me to be.
So you started off playing Train covers, some Nelly Furtado covers. You're in this punk rock band. What kind of music are you playing when you started playing those New York City dates at 16?
I was playing in like an alt rock folk band with like a 4-piece horn section. So
nice. Okay.
And we would literally pile into my minivan and drive down to the city. But I remember like passing out demo CDs on Bleecker Street.
Wow.
Like all I wanted to do was play the bitter end. I still never played the bitter end.
You haven't?
No, I haven't.
I feel like that's like a rite of passage for any like
No,
New York, New
I played
Jersey
like
kid.
the lower tier of venues for a minute. And then eventually we did some cooler, bigger shows with that project. And it was with me and my cousin. So we'll do a reunion show one day.
Kept it in the family. I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, eventually you go to school, you graduate from school, you start doing this DIY thing, making your own music and working at Applebees in Times Square.
Applebees, yeah.
That must, I love the tourists, don't get me wrong, but Times Square is intense. What was it like working at Applebees in Times Square?
Psychotic. It's definitely one of those things where you need a particular personality to survive and thrive in I guess that restaurant, but I guess any like busy restaurant. And so I feel like I crushed it. But I worked so much. I was like 50 to 70 hours a week for like almost 3 years, less when it was slow, obviously. But I didn't know what to do after school, and I felt confused, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep doing music. And so I just knew I could make money and save it, so I might as well do that. And then it worked out perfectly when I started this project, and I had that first EP done, and I just invested all of that money into the project, and it allowed me to sustain independently really until now, which is kind of insane.
Yeah, almost unheard of, you know?
Yeah, but I'm 3 years off of Applebees,
Nice.
so it's also like a different time in my life for sure.
You make such artistically rich music. I'm just so curious if something like a chain at Applebee's, did you ever draw inspiration from your time at Applebee's and put it into a song in any way?
Yes and no. I wrote a lot of music at Applebee's for that second EP because I needed to fund the second EP, so I was there a lot working. And so I wrote 2 songs from sentiment, like just when it was slow and I wanted to leave. I didn't necessarily draw my inspiration from there.
The
it was
appetizers.
but I do most of my writing when I'm walking or kind of moving, and I'll like vamp on things in my head. And so waitressing is an oddly perfect situation to do that because you're walking and it's very mindless work.
Yeah. You touched on the DIY aspect of how you came up in the self-funding. How important is that to you as an artist to this day to be DIY and to have control over your art?
I think it's 2 different things. I think having control and being self-funded, I was self-funded up until a point where I then took on more investment to grow the project. And so I think in the initial stages of any project, it's really beneficial to be self-funded so that you can put yourself in a position that when you do take on funding, you're not having to sell away your masters or your publishing or your control, because that's a risk in itself. You don't know, then you're no longer in control of what music you can make, what music you can release, when you can release it. And so the idea that I started small and was very patient in kind of that growth, I think is super important. And now being an artist, releasing a debut album, I didn't have any A&Rs for it. I was in complete control of the timeline, of how the budget is spent and everything. I own all my masters. I own all my publishing. And it just gives you a sense of freedom. And I'm not afraid, of the future of my career because I'm in control of it in a way.
Yeah.
And so you make different sacrifices, and sometimes I have anxiety attacks and sometimes I don't. But I think it's something that I definitely think is important.
Now, you talk about control over your art and the distribution and the releases of things. Did you oversee the release of the singles that were leading up to the Somewhere in Between?
Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to ask you about the artwork on the singles because your face is obscured in various different ways. I was wondering if that was deliberate. It probably was, and kind of the idea behind that.
I think for me, like it's such a common thing for, especially in the pop world, for it to be like, we want to see your face. And we want to see like a big close-up picture of your face. And like, I didn't really feel that. And like the album cover is a very close-up picture of my face. And so for the artwork, I wanted to be present in it, but I didn't want you to be able to kind of see underneath. And so that just became the theme. And it was just, in what ways can we, put a big bar over my face so that you can't see it.
It was cool. I dug the artwork.
Thanks.
I don't want to ask you this genre question because I think it's so outdated and cliche, but something that I do want to know is how you approach music, because the album is called Somewhere in Between, and I don't know exactly what that's speaking to, if that's, the point in your career you are, the point in your personal life you are, but that's, as a fan of your music, that's kind of how I think of your music, is somewhere in between of all these different genres. I don't want to know what genre you consider yourself, because you don't really need a genre anymore. But how do you approach music? Because you'll put out a song like Saint, which is kind of like a darker alt pop song, but then you'll come out with Trouble, like the collaboration with Rehab, that's just super pop and super awesome. So how do you approach making music?
It's interesting because when it comes to genre and how you approach production, it's very easy to kind of limit yourself and put yourself in a very distinct lane, and then it kind of boxes you in. And so in making this album particularly, I was worried about having all of the songs sound the same. And so my goal with it was to keep people interested and captivated. And I think to do that, you need to approach the production and arrangement of each song really differently. And so conceptually, I thought that if I have a distinct sense of writing in melody and in lyrics, and I just allowed that to be the cohesive thread that kind of strung everything together, and then let the content of each song kind of dictate where I went with the production while keeping some elements the same throughout. And so, there's like a particular, sub bass that's kind of tied into a few songs. I funneled the production through 3 producers to kind of put their hands on so that it has, it was just touched by the same producers who have their distinct styles. And so other than that, I think we're in a beautiful place now where genre doesn't really matter. I think in some formats like radio, everybody's always like, are you pop or are you alternative?
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, I don't give a fuck. I'll be whatever you want me to be. Like, just listen to the music.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we'll see. I guess people will determine what genre it is.
Definitely. And like you said, it doesn't really need a genre anymore. I do want to talk about the title, though. I said I don't really know what it speaks to. Can you kind of tell us, shed some light onto where Somewhere in Between came from?
Yeah, somewhere in between. I mean, I guess it is somewhere in between, like pop and alternative. It's it comes from the lyric somewhere in between living and dying. And so for me, the album is definitely this, broad snapshot into kind of my navigation of life, I guess, over the past year and a half, and dealing with boredom and apathy and trying to make meaning out of things. It's been the first time in my life that I've had some time to like make art, right? Because all of the other EPs were done while working so much.
Yeah.
And so it was a really hard experience for me, and I feel like not a lot of people understand that, but for me to have time and not be constantly busy, it's more anxiety producing and makes me question like why I'm alive way more than like anything else. And so I think it's just about that navigation, and it's super general in a way, but when you listen to the title track Somewhere in Between, it was the last song I wrote for the album, so it's kind of this odd summary of the whole thing.
Interesting. Like a cherry on top almost to the whole project.
Yeah, exactly. And I was looking for a title track the whole time and plugging in different songs and nothing fit.
That must be nerve-wracking, right? Naming your debut album if you don't go the self-titled route.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't. I'm not into the self-titled route for me, but yeah, writing that last song, it kind of clicked. I was going to name it Death of Me, but I thought that might be too depressing.
A little morbid. You've had success in a bunch of different ways. You've gone viral with a bunch of these songs. You have over 2 million monthly listeners on Spotify. I don't know if you knew that. With this debut album, what is success? What are you looking to get out of it? Why even make an album?
I made the album because I honestly asked my fans if they wanted an EP or an album, because I feel like where the music industry is going and where the culture is going, it's harder to digest albums, and so I just wasn't sure. And the overwhelming response was, we want an album, yeah. Which felt good to me because it felt like I've kind of created this environment and community where people want a larger artistic body of work, which I was flattered by. And I think it's just this I lost my train of thought. What was the question?
What are you looking to get out of the album? Why make an album? Because you've had such enormous success with all of these other, singles on the various streaming services. What is success now to you? How do you define success heading into this debut album?
I think I just want to reach a broader audience. And I want to tour off of it. And I want to go to cities, play shows. I want to play festivals. I want to meet people. And so for me, it's really just kind of a stamp of legitimacy on the project in a way, and then pushing it out to as many people as possible.
Definitely. Speaking of tour, you just got off tour with Betty Who this spring. You're going to have your own headlining tour this fall. What can you tell us about tour this fall?
Tour this fall is going to be a shitload of fun. We just started rehearsals for it, actually. So it's, like I said, reinterpreting the songs for live is one of my favorite things. And yeah, I'm just excited. It's like all of this live instrumentation mixed obviously with tracks, but I have like a synths, samplers, vocal effects, and so I'm busy, which makes me happy.
It's going to be wild. Now, do you have an opener on this headlining tour?
I will have an opener.
Okay.
I don't yet.
Is that nerve-wracking? We're talking about nerve-wracking naming the album. Do you have to picking the opener for something like your first headlining tour?
It's hard, but it's also not. I think there's a level of practicality that goes into it, but also, I don't know. I feel like I used to email people to open, and so I respect when people like reach out and they're just
Yeah.
like, here's what I got to offer, like please let me open. And so it's odd sometimes you have to be like, all right, tickets, but yeah, it's just about picking someone that fits and can put on a great show.
Yeah, it's cool to get to pay back these new artists, like somebody maybe put you on a show back in the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, if any fans watching right now that want to get tickets to the tour, do you know where they can go to get those?
Yeah, you can go to veriteofficial.com.
All right on. Well, Somewhere in Between is out June 23rd. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. And thanks for watching.